Rick and Morty with C1C2 English, the ultimate advanced listening practice. Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. So far, we've covered the basics with Cullinan for a 1 and a 2, and we dived into everyday conversations with Tom and Jerry for B1 and B2. But today, we are stepping into the big leagues. We are unlocking the ultimate level of English fluency. Welcome to C1 and C2 advanced listening practice with none other than Rick and Morty. Now, you might ask, why Rick and Morty? Well, if you want to master advanced English, standard textbooks won't cut it anymore. You need to understand fast-paced speech, dark humor, complex wordplay, scientific jargon, and deep existential dread. And trust me, Rick Sanchez is the undisputed king of all that. In this video, we are going to break down some of the most iconic, viral scenes from the show. We'll analyze the hidden idioms, the slang, and the advanced linguistic structures that native speakers use when they're talking at 100 miles an hour. So, grab your portal guns, fasten your seatbelts, and let's get swifty. Scene 1, The Legend of Pickle Rick. Let's kick things off with arguably the most famous scene in adult animation history. Rick turns himself into a literal pickle just to get out of family therapy. Classic Rick, right? Let's listen to how he reveals this to Morty. Did you catch that? Rick says, "Turn the pickle over." Simple, right? But notice his tone. He's building anticipation. And then he drops the punchline. "I turned myself into a pickle, Morty. I'm Pickle Rick." Now, let's look at Morty's reaction. Morty doesn't look amazed. He looks completely exhausted. He asks Rick a very important question using a great advanced structure. He says, "Are you going to tell me that this has some sort of sublime cosmic significance?" Let's pause right there and dissect this vocabulary. Sublime. This means something of such excellence, grandeur, or beauty that it inspires great admiration or awe. In everyday advanced English, we often use it to describe food, art, or scenery. For example, the dessert was absolutely sublime, but here, Morty is using it sarcastically. Cosmic significance. Cosmic relates to the universe. Cosmic significance means something that alters the fabric of reality or has ultimate, universal importance. Morty is calling out Rick's nonsense here. He's saying, "Are you going to pretend there is a profound, universe-changing reason for this, or did you just do it because you're crazy?" Look at how Rick evades the question. This sentence structure is a masterclass in C2 rhetoric and manipulation. He uses a philosophical paradox to avoid admitting he's wrong. Let's break down his exact words. The reason anyone would do this, if they could, which they can't, would be because they could, which they can't. What is he doing here? He is using a tautology, saying the same thing twice in different words, making it sound complex but actually saying nothing at all. In advanced English, listening, catching these fast, repetitive, hypothetical clauses "if they could, which they can't" is crucial. Native speakers do this when they want to sound dismissive or show off their intellectual superiority. Scene 2, The Dark Meaning of Wubba Lubba Dub Dub. Moving on to our second scene. For a long time, Rick's catchphrase, "Wubba Lubba Dub Dub," just sounded like silly, nonsensical gibberish. It felt like something out of a 90-second sitcom. But in the Season 1 finale, Bird Person reveals its true, tragic meaning to Morty. Let's listen closely. This scene is crucial for C1 and C2 learners because it highlights the contrast between superficial delivery and profound psychological subtext. Rick uses a goofy, energetic catchphrase to mask his deep depression. Let's look at how Bird Person describes Rick's mental state later in that conversation. He talks about Rick's existential angst. Let's break down this concept. Existential angst. Angst is a deep feeling of anxiety, dread, or insecurity. Existential angst is a specific philosophical term. It refers to the feeling of dread or anxiety that arises when a person contemplates the apparent meaninglessness of life and the universe. Rick is the smartest man in the multiverse. He knows everything, and because he knows everything, he feels that nothing matters. When he shouts "Wubba Lubba Dub Dub" while partying, it's a textbook example of coping mechanisms. In advanced English, when someone is coping, they are dealing with a difficult situation. But if we say someone is using humor as a coping mechanism, it means they joke around so they don't have to face their pain. When you listen to Rick, you always have to listen between the lines. His anger and his jokes are almost always a shield for his vulnerability. Scene 3, Rick's brutal truth bombs. For our third scene, Let's look at how the show handles fast-paced argument and philosophical nihilism. Rick frequently drops truth bombs on his grandkids. In one iconic moment, he looks at Morty and Summer and says, "First of all, you're both pieces of shit. Yeah, I can prove it mathematically." But the real C1 C2 golden nugget comes when he discusses the nature of reality. Let's listen to this fast monologue. Let's analyze Morty's famous line to Summer here, which ties perfectly into Rick's worldview. Nobody exists on purpose. Nobody belongs anywhere. Everybody's gonna die. Come watch TV. Look at the rhythm of this speech. It's incredibly fast, blunt, and devoid of any emotional sugarcoating. Sugarcoating. To sugarcoat something means to make a harsh and pleasant truth sound more acceptable or pleasant. Morty does the exact opposite here. He delivers a brutal reality check. Nihilism. This philosophy is the core theme of the show. Nihilism is the belief that life is meaningless and that all values are baseless. When native speakers reach a high level of debate, they often use this kind of reductive logic. Reductive logic means stripping away all emotional arguments and focusing purely on cold, hard, often harsh facts. Notice how Morty switches from a massive cosmic truth nobody exists on purpose to a completely mundane everyday activity. Come watch TV. This juxtaposition is what makes the humor work. And understanding this shift in tone is a major milestone in mastering advanced English listening. Scene 4. The political manipulation in the citadel of Rick's. Before we wrap things up, we cannot talk about advanced English without looking at the language of politics, bureaucracy, and manipulation. For this, we are traveling to the citadel of Rick's. Let's listen to candidate Morty giving a speech that completely shifts the power dynamics of the entire multiverse. Did you hear that? The tone here is completely different from Rick's chaotic rants. This is smooth, calculated, and highly sophisticated rhetoric. Candidate Morty is using emotional appeal to unite a divided audience. Let's look at the vocabulary he uses to sway the crowd. Rhetoric, the art of effective or persuasive speaking or writing, especially the use of figures of speech and other compositional techniques. In C1 C2 English, understanding rhetorical devices helps you see how people use language to influence others, sway the crowd. This is a great idiomatic expression. To sway means to move back and forth, but when you sway a crowd, it means you convince a large group of people to agree with your opinion or point of view. Morty says, the division is an illusion. He is using a classic political tactic, focusing on a common enemy, the elite Ricks, to make the working class Ricks and Mortys feel unified. Notice how he uses words like status quo, exploitation, and unity. When you are listening to native speakers in professional or political settings, you need to catch these subtle linguistic cues. They aren't just delivering information. They are framing a narrative to gain power. And evil Morty is an absolute genius at it. Scene 5. The chaos of interdimensional cable. Now, let's completely flip the script. From the cold, calculated political speech of evil Morty, we go to the absolute chaotic madness of interdimensional cable. What makes these episodes so unique and incredibly difficult for advanced English learners is that the voice actors are completely improvising their lines. Did you notice how messy that sentence structure was? The actor stumbles, laughs, pauses, and corrects himself in real time. In traditional language learning, you are taught to speak in perfect, grammatically correct sentences. But in reality, real English is messy. Improv, something that is created, spoken, or performed without preparation, stumble over words, to make mistakes or hesitate while speaking. Often because you are thinking fast or nervous. When the salesman says, "Don't even hesitate. Don't even give it a second thought," he is using high-pressure sales jargon. But he delivers it with a laugh. Listening to interdimensional cable is the ultimate test for a C2 listener, because you have to filter out the noise, the stuttering, the giggles, the random pauses, and still understand the core message. If you can understand slang and humor when the speaker doesn't even have a script, your listening skills are practically flawless. Outro. We covered everything today. We went from turning into a pickle, to exploring existential nihilism, to analyzing political manipulation, and finally, navigating the chaotic world of raw improvisation. That is the beauty of Rick and Morty. It pushes your brain to process high-speed English, complex vocabulary, and shifting tones all at once. If you manage to follow along with these scenes and breakdowns today, give yourself a massive pat on the back. You are officially crushing your
Rick and Morty with C1 C2 English Episode 2, Paradoxes and Reality Lesson 1. The Consequences of the Vat of Acid. Let's start with an episode that won an Emmy Award for its incredible storytelling, the Vat of Acid episode. In this scene, Morty challenges Rick's creativity, accusing him of being lazy. To prove a point, Rick invents a device that allows Morty to save his place in time, just like a video game. If Morty makes a mistake, he can just press a button and reset his life. Let's listen to the high-stakes argument that happens when Morty realizes the horrible truth behind this invention. Did you catch the tension in their voices? Rick reveals that the device didn't reset time. Instead, every time Morty pressed the button, he vaporized a Morty in another dimension and took his place. Rick delivers this line with absolute cold indifference. Let's look at some of the C1 C2 vocabulary used in this conceptual breakdown. Consequence, a result or effect of an action or condition, typically one that is unwelcome or unpleasant. In C1 listening, pay attention to how Rick emphasizes unforeseen consequences to make Morty feel guilty. Hypocrisy, the practice of claiming to have moral standards or beliefs to which one's own behavior does not conform. Morty often accuses Rick of sheer hypocrisy because Rick acts like a god but throws childish tantrums. Rick says, "You wanted a place with no consequences, Morty. But consequence is the fabric of reality." Miss the philosophical weight of that phrase. In advanced English, when someone talks about the fabric of something, they mean the essential structure or foundation of it. Rick uses this grand, abstract concept to completely shatter Morty's moral defense. Understanding how native speakers transition from petty arguments to profound existential statements is a key milestone for C2 fluency. Scene 2. Escaping the simulation M. Night shame aliens. Moving on to our second scene, we dive into the mind-bending world of simulations. In this classic episode, Rick is abducted by a race of scammers who trap him inside a giant virtual reality matrix to steal his recipe for concentrated dark matter. But Rick is always 3 steps ahead. Let's listen to how he analyzes his surroundings to expose the simulation. What makes this scene a goldmine for C1 C2 learners is the vocabulary of skepticism, paranoia, and analytical thinking. Rick looks at the minor glitches in the system and says, "The water physics are completely rendering incorrectly. Let's break down this high-level terminology. Paranoia, an unrealistic distrust of others or a feeling of intense persecution. While paranoia is usually a negative trait, for Rick, it's a survival mechanism. Deception, the act of hiding the truth or misleading someone, especially for personal advantage." This entire episode is a masterclass in linguistic and visual deception. Rick uses a highly technical, detached vocabulary to describe a terrifying situation. Instead of panicking, he talks about processing power, rendering speeds, and algorithmic limitations. When native speakers are trying to maintain control in a chaotic or deceptive environment, they often switch to an overly analytical or clinical tone. By focusing on technical details rather than emotional reactions, they project absolute authority. Catching this shift in tone helps you understand not just what is being said, but the psychological power play behind it. Scene 3. A wrinkle in time shattered realities. For our third scene, let's look at what happens when time itself becomes completely unstable. Following the events of the Season 1 finale, Rick, Morty, and Summer find themselves in a state of quantum uncertainty. Because Morty and Summer are incredibly hesitant and unsure of themselves, their timeline literally splits into multiple parallel realities on screen. Let's listen to Rick trying to fix this chaotic mess while screaming at his grandkids. This scene is a nightmare for lower-level listeners because the characters are talking simultaneously across multiple split screens, creating a literal wall of overlapping sound. But for a C2 listener, this is the ultimate challenge. Let's look at the core concepts driving this fast-paced dialogue. Hesitation, the action of pausing or holding back before saying or doing something, usually due to uncertainty or fear. In this episode, hesitation is literally a dangerous physical force. Quantum uncertainty, a fundamental concept in physics where certain pairs of physical properties cannot be known simultaneously with high precision. Rick uses this scientific jargon to scold Morty and Summer for their lack of confidence. Rick yells, "Your baseline uncertainty has fractured our chronological certainty." Look at how he contrasts the words uncertainty and certainty. He is using juxtaposition, placing two opposite concepts close together to emphasize their contrast. In fast-paced English debates, intellectual speakers use structural contrast to make their arguments sound incredibly sharp and devastating. If you can follow Rick's frantic explanation, while the audio tracks are overlapping, your advanced listening comprehension is exceptional. Scene 4. Roy, a life well lived, and the illusion of choice. Before we close out today's episode, we have to look at one of the most philosophical concepts in the entire series, the arcade game called Roy, a life well lived. In this scene, Morty puts on a virtual reality helmet at a space arcade and instantly lives the entire life of a regular human man named Roy. He grows up, gets married, beats cancer, works a mundane job, and dies of old age only to take off the helmet and realize it was all just a game that lasted for minutes. Let's listen to Rick's brutal critique of how Morty played the game. The scene is brilliant because it tackles the concept of the illusion of choice and mundane reality versus infinite cosmic freedom. Let's look at the advanced vocabulary surrounding this existential gaming moment. Mundane, lacking interest or excitement. Dull and ordinary. Morty plays the game by making safe, mundane choices like selling carpets and paying taxes. Illusion of choice, a psychological phenomenon where a person believes they have complete freedom and control over their life. But in reality, their options are highly limited or predetermined by an outside system. When Morty wakes up, he is completely disoriented. He forgot his real name, his real life, and his grandfather. Rick looks at him and says, "You wasted your life, carpet store Morty." You didn't even take him off the grid. Notice the slang phrase, off the grid. In advanced everyday English, to go off the grid means to live without using public utilities like electricity and water, or to completely disappear from society and digital tracking. Rick is mocking Morty for being too scared to take risks, even in a simulation. This scene teaches us to listen for cultural metaphors, how native speakers use the language of gaming and technology to describe real-life existential choices. Outgrown. There you have it, folks. We have officially survived episode 2 of our Rick and Morty Advanced English journey. We analyzed the heavy consequences of a simulated life, the technical language of virtual deception, the chaos of quantum hesitation, and what it truly means to live a mundane life versus taking it off the grid. If you were able to follow the logic behind the vat of acid paradox, or the overlapping chaos of a split timeline today, you are performing at a true C2 level of listening comprehension. Keep this up, and no native speaker will ever be able to confuse you with fast speech or hidden sarcasm again. If some of these conceptual breakdowns flew right over your head, don't sweat it. C5 vocabulary and philosophical arguments take time to get used to. Feel free to loop back, turn on the subtitles if you need to, and study the vocabulary blocks we highlighted today. And remember, if your brain is frying from all this multidimensional thinking, you can always take a relaxing break with my Kellylin or Tom and Jerry playlists. What kind of themes should we tackle in episode 3? Do you want to look at the psychological therapy sessions with Dr. Wong? Or should we break down the emotional and tragic backstory of Rick's original universe? Drop your votes in the comments below. Make sure to smash that like button, subscribe to the channel so you never miss a breakthrough, and as always, stay swifty, guys. See you in the next reality.